time we talked about low incidence disabilities, and we threw in autism because we did a special about a 30-minute session on autism last time. So we won't cover autism this time. If you need some tips for autism, you can look at the video from last time. You can certainly ask questions this time. I'll entertain them at the end, but I don't plan on representing those slides or anything. Autism is one of the higher incidence disabilities, though. We're also going to talk about learning and motivation theories, because those affect how you teach. They affect how students learn. And for those of you who are studying to take an exam, they are on the exam. So all of this is exam kind of material, but all of this is important from the standpoint of knowing about your students and how to reach and teach your students. So everything we're going over tonight has a purpose. All right. So here's our focus areas for tonight. Under learning and motivation, those are the theories that we're going to cover. We're only going to cover a little bit about each one, so we're hitting the tip of the iceberg. Always, if there's anything that you want to know more about, please ask. Ask in the coaching corner is a good place, because then I can post more information there and it's available to everybody. You can always send me your question in email as well, and then I'll just post your question and answer in the coaching corner for you and for me. So that helps everybody. So if you think of something later on, just shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to answer it and give the answer out to everybody, so everybody gets a crack at it. Those are the disability categories that we're going to cover. That's shorthand for them. We'll go over what all of those mean in case you don't know what the shorthand means a little bit later on when we hit the disability categories. Let's get started real quick with the approaches to learning and motivation. I made a little chart that basically categorizes those approaches, and so I'll let you look at that for just a minute. It gives you the theory and then the person who had the most influence on the theory. That's either the author or the inventor, or the person who's associated mostly with the theory. So that's person and theory. I know that doesn't give you a lot of information, but it just gives you an overall look. I always like what's the high level look first. Now let's look at the low level look. Let's start with the psychodynamic theories. Freud is probably the person most associated with the psychodynamic theories. I'll be honest with you, Freud is not followed very much anymore. But I did put Freud in because Freud deserves a place in the historical perspective. Freud looked at childhood experiences, and he said that those really influence your learning and your development. He had all of these, what he calls psychosexual stages of development that he postulated. I didn't list them here. I don't think that they're that important to know. Freud came up with personality structures. And he said there's always this balancing act that you're in, and you learn by balancing yourself between the id, which is your libido, and your superego, which is your self-preservation. So there's always some balancing going on. And so that is how, in Freudian theory, that you would kind of explain learning. So in a nutshell, that is Sigmund Freud and Freud's influence on learning. Now, Erik Erikson took Freud's stages of learning and said, that's important, but there is some influence of environment on learning. So you have these, and he said, and the stages, I think, have to be mastered, and they kind of have to be mastered in order. So when you master a stage, you can cope with things that happen in the next stage. So he said you're learning. You learn by mastering stages. So over to the left on this slide, you'll see some of the stages and what's covered in those stages. So learning is kind of a lifelong process in Erik Erikson's point of view. And stages play very much a process. But again, he's listed with Freud because he expanded on Freud's ideas. So, and then along came the behaviorist. Now, the behaviorist, I know you know who's associated with that. B.F. Skinner would be the person most prominent in behaviorist theory. And the behaviorist said, well, you know, we really think you learn because you control things in your environment. You're always operating on things in your environment. And there came the term operant conditioning, okay, where you've got something happening, a stimulus, you've got a response, and then you've got some kind of consequence. It's either a reward or a punishment. Pavlov was there also with classical conditioning. That was involuntary behaviors being conditioned. And then, you know, there's all kinds of stimulus response theories, but the behaviorists didn't focus on stages or what's going on in your head, but basically what's observable, what can we see happening in the environment, and how do you operate on your environment, and then what happens when you operate on it. Do you get punished? Do you get rewarded? You know, what's going on? The picture I've got here is called a Skinner box, and this is the mouse pressing a button to get a reward, a food reward or a water reward or something like that. So a lot of the behavioral theory was done, or behavioral work was done with animals. So that's one of the critiques of behaviorism. Alfred Bandura took Skinner's theories and expanded on them a little bit, though. He said, not only do you operate on your environment, but you actually watch what's going on, you observe, you imitate, you learn, because, you know, if you imitate something and you're rewarded for it, then you're more likely to do it again. If you imitate and model someone's behavior, get punished for it, you're less likely to do it again. And he did a series of experiments, and if you look over to the left, you see a child that looks like throwing things or fighting with things. That's a doll. It's like a clown doll that you could hit and things like that. And what he did was he brought in some children who actually modeled hitting the doll, and then they were either rewarded or punished for doing that. And he found children observed the other children doing it, and if the children were rewarded for hitting the doll, they were more likely to imitate that behavior and to continue doing it. Even little tiny children, you can see the little girl hitting the doll down there in the lower photograph. So very interesting work, and this work was not done with animals. This work was done with human beings. So he expanded upon the behaviorist and brought in more of the social aspect. Now let's look at the cognitive theorist. Probably the most well-known cognitive theorist, and I classified him as what we would call cognitive developmental, is Jean Piaget. And the reason I put developmental on there is Piaget had stages of learning, and I listed the 4 cognitive stages of learning for Piaget. Piaget obviously is very important and has a very high-ranking place in education because his stages do bear some very true things for education here. So I listed his 4 cognitive stages out for you. But Piaget also said, you know, we do learn by interacting with our environment, but we think about what's going on. If you look at the model over to the left, this is his model of assimilation and accommodation. So you assimilate knowledge and you achieve some kind of equilibrium, and then you get into a new situation where you have to learn, and you experience some disequilibrium while you're learning, but then you accommodate. You learn, or you figure out how to get along, or you get what you need, and so then you're accommodated, and then you start through the cycle again. So that's an interesting concept for learning, but also the stages as well fit very, very well with what we know about children and how they learn. Look at the fourth stage. Now I just realized they're all numbered as number 1. That's really good. Okay. Look at the fourth stage, formal operational, 12 years plus. This is where students really get into the ability to do abstract reasoning, to really, really think abstractly. So, you know, this is where children really, really get to the reasoning stage. Prior to that, I'm sure they're able to reason, but better with concrete. If you look at the third stage, there's the concrete operational, better with concrete models. So that certainly would influence how you're teaching and how students are learning. All right, let's look at the constructivist folks now. Constructivist folks, again, this have a big influence on education as well. Vygotsky is well known in the field of education in terms of influence on learning. Constructivists put the word construct into their learning. You learn not just by involvement, but active involvement. You know, you've got to be interacting with your environment, but it's got to be very active learning. When I think of this, I think of more of hands-on learning, you know, in terms of thinking. The other concept that Vygotsky talks about quite a lot is the zone of proximal development. So if you look over there to the left, there's a little model of that. There's a, you know, it reminds me a little bit of that disequilibrium thing from Piaget. There's an area where there are skills that are just a little difficult for someone to master, but, you know, if you have the right person to help you, to guide you, to encourage you, or to provide that learning opportunity, then you're going to be able to master those skills. So it's that zone of proximal development. So, you know, it's where we foster those learning experiences. So that's a very interesting concept. And then lastly, the humanistic approach. Abraham Maslow is probably the most well-known person here, although the next person I'm going to tell you about is also fairly well-known. But Maslow, I think, was kind of first out of the gate to talk about what people need and you know, what kinds of needs we have. And he said, you know, we learn and we develop because we want to be a self-actualized person, to be the best person that we can be, to achieve our best potential. So he came up with what he calls a needs hierarchy. So if you look over to the left, there's Maslow's needs hierarchy. Now, the interesting thing about his theory is he said that our basic needs have to be met before we can get to the next level. So in order to learn, your basic needs have to be met. And basic needs are things like, you know, food, water, shelter, comfort, love, you know, things like that. So if your basic needs aren't being met, according to Maslow, you're not going to be able to learn. So, you know, think about that in terms of your students. Do you have any students that come to school hungry or that come to school without sleep? Anybody work with students who are really, really deprived? You know, you wonder, are they learning? You know, can they focus on learning? You know, that sort of thing. I've seen that a little bit and had some very personal experience with that with some students before, where, you know, those types of things that, you know, you just wonder, can the student really, really focus at school when they're hungry, or things are in such a turmoil at home that, you know, can they really do it? Right. The last theory, and I put this person in the humanist category, although there's probably not a really good category, is theories of multiple intelligences, and this is Howard Gardner's theory. And I know I believe Gardner has identified more than 8 intelligences at this point. I couldn't find a picture of anything more than 8, so I put on here the picture that I could find, at least, of the 8 multiple intelligences that Gardner talks about. But Gardner says, we learn by using our intelligences. As teachers, then we've got to figure out, how is the student learning? What are they using? And, what can we teach to? What's the student using? What's their modalities? So if you look at those multiple intelligences, think of yourself. What are your intelligences? What are your areas? Are you a bodily kinesthetic person? Are you athletic? Do you like movement? Do you like music? Are you verbal? Are you logical? What are your strengths? If someone were to teach to you, what would be your areas? Just curious. How would you categorize yourself? I'm definitely a visual spatial person, but I'm not really an artist, although I do draw a lot. Anne will tell you that. Logical. All right. It can be more than one. I'm sure you have more than one intelligence, and your students do too. Interpersonal, yeah. I like the interpersonal, and then there's an intrapersonal. Print learner, logical, mathematical, yeah. Draw the picture representations, yes. I'm very much a picture learner too, Stephanie. If I can see a picture or a diagram, I can understand it a whole lot better. Verbal, hands-on, logical, facts. Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of us are saying we like pictures, we like hands-on, we like logical things. We are verbal, and I think that we had to be to get through college and to be where we are. But we also understand there's a whole nother layer, and that may be why we are working with students that we're working with, because I think they need some of those other intelligences besides verbal. A lot of them are not as verbal. Or don't understand verbal, but they understand visual or other methodologies. Yeah, Stephanie says, I have a lot of those visual learners, but I can't understand them. I hate picture directions, but I can read the text. Yeah. Okay. Mine are very verbal and logical, but they're also visual. Good. Okay. Then they've got the best of both worlds. That's great. All right. So that, in a nutshell, is a lot of the, oops, let's go back one. A lot of the learning theories. So I found a little video that goes over some of the major ones like cognitive, constructivism, behaviorism, and humanism, some of the areas. And so what I want to do, it's about a 3-minute video, is let's watch the video and just kind of listen in for some major, it'll go over some major points of each of the theories. And then at the conclusion of the video, let's talk about, how would you teach, these teachers are talking about how to teach spelling, okay? And they're each taking a viewpoint. But so at the conclusion, think about how you would do it, either spelling or some other topic, or, what pieces of the theories would you subscribe to? I certainly don't necessarily think that one theory, one size fits all, one theory explains everything. But, what do you like about the theories? What pieces do you like about them? What pieces do you think explains learning? Now, I will warn you that the sound on this video is a little low, so you may want to turn up your speakers. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and go open the video. So bear with me just a second. And let's see. I think it's this one.
Principal Peters, we've gathered, just as you asked us to try to come up with a lesson plan to teach Johnny spelling.
And in all my years as a behaviorist, my suggestion is that we use drills. I think they are the best way to teach children spelling.
See, I'd have to disagree with you, behaviorism, because as a cognitivist, I believe that the teacher needs to facilitate the student's learning, but the student needs to take part and have control of their learning. They need to know where to put this new knowledge into the schema in their brain. So they need to really be involved.
I see what you're saying, and I see where you're coming from. And as a humanism, I think that what we can do is when drilling him, we just need to give him some resources, many resources. Let's give him some choices of how we're going to do this, just so we give him some opportunity. What are you thinking over there?
Well, I'm thinking as a constructivist that the student needs to be an active participant in constructing his own knowledge. He needs to be able to acquire it in a way that he knows that he's going to be able to use it out there in the real world.
Yeah, I have to agree with you.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah, very good. Now, once again, like I said, I think the teacher needs to facilitate in their learning, but the student takes full responsibility for that learning. They take responsibility for how they put it into their brain. The teacher may facilitate and give them options and learning strategies to use, but that student chooses which one to use to remember that information.
And I think Johnny needs to be invested in this. He needs to be invested in his learning, especially in spelling.
Yes.
What do you think?
I absolutely agree
Yeah.
with that. I think that there needs to be a very close personal relationship with Johnny so that I can figure out his zone of proximal development and I can take him right to the edge of where that is and I can teach him everything he needs to know.
Now, I disagree, because truly, we are all just empty vessels waiting to be filled with all kinds of information. And in addition to that, we have responsibilities as teachers, and responsibility to our states and the parents to make sure that we satisfy the glicks. And if we're going to get Johnny to be able to spell well, then we need to be able to pour this information into him so he learns it, he's able to develop it.
Mm-hmm. I think so. But
Okay. It sound like Yvette had a problem with sound? Quinn, I'm not sure if you had a problem with sound or what was the issue there. Yvette says no luck. Did anybody else have a problem with sound on this? I know the sound was low and maybe not as great a quality on this video. I'm going to come out of the video and we'll go back to the presentation. So I'm sorry about that. Everybody else okay with sound? Sometimes it gets a little wacky. It's okay. All right. Yeah, Yvette, I've tried these in MP4 and in Flash, and they're not going to play on your iPad. I'm so sorry. But you have the link on the slide, so so I've started putting the link, so maybe you can grab the link, and then you can go off on your iPad and look at it, look at the video. Okay, all right. Sound was coming in and out. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, and these are not, they're not crucial that you look at them. It's just another little learning tool that if I can find some things that relate to what we're doing, it's just nice to have something, a break to something different besides me droning on. So, so what did you think about that? What did you think about those four people and their ways of teaching spelling? What would you subscribe to, or what pieces would you do if you had to teach spelling, or something that you do teach? Let's put it that way. You don't have to teach spelling. What pieces did you like? What did you hear in that you like that you think would work for you or your students? I like the concept of the brain as an empty container. I thought that was kind of entertaining. I'm thinking, oh, if they're that empty, we're really in trouble. Yeah, the visual is important with spelling. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, right. But the students got to take ownership. Good. Yes. Good. Yes, they do. That concept of active involvement has to be there along with them as well. Stephanie said, like, cognitive statement that student needs to take charge of their learning. Yep. Constructivism, students will use their learning in real life. Why is it important? I'm kind of known for asking that, because if I don't see the importance of something, I'm just not going to memorize it. I might learn something about it, but it's not going to really stick unless I really think it's something really, really important. Yeah. All right. We have some good takeaway from that. Yeah. Very good. I got a couple other folks typing. Behaviorism, students will learn for rewards. Yep. I think we're all kind of reward driven, even if it's just somebody patting you on the back saying you did a good job. Yeah. The real life statement. Yep. Because I teach English as a second language. Yeah. Good. Right. Okay. Keep typing. I'm going to scoot on to the next slide. Good thoughts? We're going to talk about disability data now.